Dan Rome draws for a living. He's not an artist. He's a management consultant who uses visual thinking to make complicated ideas simple. And that simplicity facilitates effective communication, problem solving, and innovation. His books, such as Back of the Napkin and Draw to Win, explain how anyone can use visual thinking.
When we talk about visual thinking, I mean something very specific. I mean intentionally taking advantage of our visual system. So our eyes, our optic nerve, our mind's eye, our visual neocortex, this incredible mechanism that we have in our heads to help us visually see the world, intentionally taking advantage of that in order to see things in the world that would have been invisible if we were just talking. And then by virtue of being able to see them, taking kind of the underlying shapes of these ideas and just drawing out simple little pictures that clarify what's already in our own mind. And then the beauty of it is I've created this picture of my idea, and now I have a picture that I can show you, effectively guaranteeing that you're going to see the same thing as I am because we're looking at the same picture. It's powerful, it's miraculous, it's really cool.
So in your first book, The Back of the Napkin, you talk about how simple pictures can help us solve complex problems. How does visual thinking help problem solving?
Well, Lisa, if you think about problems, life is complicated, especially if you're in the business world. Every time we look at a new challenge, it looks very, very complex. It's like this kind of conceptual plate of spaghetti. So what visual thinking helps us do is break down what appears to be an overwhelmingly complex initial situation, and then tear it down into its underlying kind of visual elements. What are the pieces that actually make up this problem? And since we're using our visual mind and we're trying to break this complexity down into these pictures, we can actually see it. And people often talk about the simplicity that's on the other side of complexity. I have found no better way to get to that simplicity than simply to draw things out. So let's say that this circle represents our brain, our visual engine, and we're going to divide it up into 6 slices because it turns out that the way vision actually works is dividing the world up into 6 different types of information. And one of those is going to be who and what. Another one of those is going to be how much. Another one of those is going to be where. Another one is going to be when does it happen. Does this not sound familiar? This is kind of the 6 W's all over again. Another one is how, and then we'll end up with why. And what our visual engine does is it looks at something. We look at it, and then it says, okay, I'm looking for the people and the things, and then I'm going to look for how many of them there are, and then I'm going to look for their location, and then their sequence, and then sort of the flow of how do they work, and I'm going to come up with a solution at the end. So all we do to be good visual thinkers is just draw our pictures around this circle. So when we talk about who, we're going to draw some little stick figures. If we talk about what, we're going to draw like some little icons or something. And then we go into how much. Okay, so now we're going to draw ourselves a little chart that quantifies our numbers. And then we're going to say, okay, so where are they? And then we're going to draw a little map right here that says, well, some of the characters are over here and some are over here, and there's a great distance between them, and that might be a problem. And then we'll say, okay, and when do they work? What's the sequence in which they're taking place? Well, we have our first thing here, and then our next thing here, and then our next thing over here. And then we're going to say, okay, so how does this all work? Well, these things interact like this, which causes this to happen. Maybe they go over here. Maybe they come back here. And then our last picture is, what's the big aha? What do I now know that's going to make me really happy? When I talk about drawing, when I talk about visual thinking, I'm not talking about this as an artistic process. We're talking about this as a thinking process. So here's what happens. Often when we're talking about a problem, we use our words actually, unintentionally in many cases, to actually sort of obfuscate what the real problem is. You can't do that with pictures anymore. When you draw out, and it doesn't matter how artistically beautiful they are, in fact, often the uglier, the simpler, the goofier your pictures are, the more power they convey because they get to the essence of the idea. And when you draw those things out, everybody looks at it and says, I'm seeing the same thing. You can't really lie anymore. You can't hide the truth anymore. It comes out, and that's what's so powerful about this.
Can you give us an example, a particularly complex problem that you helped clarify in pictures?
I have a story that is just one of my favorites. So you will remember not so many years ago, we started to talk about healthcare reform. We just started, and this is a conversation that obviously is going to go on for a long, long time. But what I found really kind of upsetting about the whole conversation about healthcare reform years ago was depending on which sort of news service you listen to, some people were saying, oh, this is horrible, this is terrible, and other people were saying, oh, healthcare reform is the greatest thing. And I thought, well, wait a minute, if they're both reading from the same law, how is it possible that you get such wildly different interpretations? And I thought, well, let's put these pictures to work. So myself and some colleagues who actually do know about the healthcare system in the United States and about the law, we locked ourselves in a room for 3 days and we drew a series of 46 little pictures trying to explain the Affordable Care Act, its underlying idea, its genesis, what did it actually mean, what was the outcome, et cetera. And we were successful. And it took us this series of pictures, which we could then look at and say, oh, now I get it. So I took those pictures and I put them in a PowerPoint and I uploaded it to LinkedIn. This is a few years ago now, SlideShare. And an amazing thing happened because within a couple of weeks, hundreds of thousands of people had downloaded this. And then the Huffington Post picked up on it and they said, oh, look, someone's trying to explain healthcare with these drawings on the back of a napkin. What's very funny is that the Huffington Post actually put it in their comedy section, which I found kind of ironic because I actually meant it seriously. But then it goes crazy because now we're getting millions of views and downloads and comments. And so I'm sitting in my office in San Francisco thinking, I'm so cool, I drew pictures that help explain healthcare. And then I got a call from a producer in Fox News in New York who said to me, hey, Dan, since you're clearly one of America's leading thinkers on healthcare reform, would you come on air on Fox News and explain to our viewers with your pictures what healthcare reform is all about? And I'm thinking, Fox News, you bet, I'm there. So, because who needs to know better than some of your viewers? So they flew me out to New York, and it was incredible. So 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we got on the Fox Business Channel, and they gave me, it was crazy, 7 minutes of live time on television to go through the first set of pictures. And it was really cool. And as I was flying home, I was thinking, look at the power of pictures, look at me, this is so awesome. The guy who drew the pictures gets on television and all of this. And then I go back to my office, and the next day, I get another call. And this time, the voice on the phone says, Dan, this is the White House Office of Communications. We would like to invite you in to show us how did you do that. And so I twice had an opportunity to go to the White House Office of Communications and give the folks there some examples and tools that they might use to be able to more visually explain some complex issues around economics or healthcare reform, et cetera. And it was so cool. And I think to this day, it's really one of my favorite stories because, to be fair, am I really one of America's leading experts on healthcare reform? Not so much. I mean, I've learned a lot along the way, but who's the guy who's being asked to go on television? Who's the guy who's being asked to come into the White House and explain this? The person who drew the picture. And I think there's no better example than that.
So if I hear you right, if you're able to draw the picture that other people can understand, it will allow you to have a lot more influence.
The battle today is a battle for attention. We're all so overwhelmed, whether it's online or whether we're in the meeting room or whether we're making a pitch. The battle is for attention. There are few things you can do in a meeting room environment that give you more authority today than being the person who goes up to the whiteboard or the flip chart, to be the person who takes the pen in hand and says, wait a minute, we know we've got this challenge. Let me draw out what the elements of it are. Magic is going to happen. You will find that the people in the room, you've got their attention now. And you talk about influence, not to overstate it, but there's actually almost this kind of, I guess you could call it cognitive ownership. If I am the person who has the pen in my hand and I'm drawing, I own your attention pretty much until the moment that I stop. So if, subtext here, I've rehearsed my drawing in anticipation of likely questions, and I can keep that drawing going for a while and actually get to a point, I really own the room. Okay, so two guys are sitting in a bar in Texas back in 1967, Herb and Rollin, and they've got this little cocktail napkin, and the two of them are talking about the realities of Texas. You know, it's a big state and they're business guys, and you want to travel from Dallas over here to Houston, over here to San Antonio, and they draw this triangle just connecting those three major cities of Texas. And guess what? That's the original business plan of Southwest Airlines, drawn by Rollin King and Herb Kelleher on the back of the cocktail napkin, 1967, and the world's most successful airline is born off of that little picture. And I come from a consulting background, professional services, and we used to have this little axiom that seemed to hold, that myself or someone on my team would go to every business pitch that we did, and our goal would be at some point during the meeting, go up to the front of the room, take the pen and say, if I understand correctly what this project is really about, it looks something like this, and we would do this. Every time we did that, we would win the engagement. We were captivating people's visual mind, and they would say, well, if they can do that in the room, imagine what they can do when we actually start to solve the problem. It's cool.
So it sounds like this is also a really important leadership skill. I went to business school many years ago. I spent a lot of time studying numbers, spreadsheets. I did not spend any time learning how to draw out my ideas. Why do you think this is not being taught more?
When we were children, we drew all of the time. We pretty much had that beaten out of us by the time we were in second grade because someone said, that's a terrible drawing. Dogs don't look anything like that. I hate that. That's ugly. You're a terrible drawer, at which point we never drew again. Or someone would say, you're so good at that, you should go into art. No one ever says, you're so good at that drawing, you should go into business. So we get off path. So if you think about people like Steve Jobs, if you think about people like Charles Schwab, if you think about people like Mark Benioff of Salesforce, or Angela Ahrendts of Burberry, or all of these people who are like great business leaders, if you just look below what they did, they drew all of the time. Now, that's not made public. So then on the other side, if you think about authors, like the best-selling authors of all time, J.K. Rowling, drew everything. But somehow we get to this idea that the visual side isn't serious, and so we kind of purge it out of our thinking, and it's an enormous mistake.